Hello everyone. Today I'm here to tell you what I believe is the gateway drug for sustainable gardening. Is it one of these books on the floor that I've laid in front of us? Uh, have a good look. There's a big range. You got, braiding sweetgrass, edible forest gardens, some arrowhead books, bees in your backyard, all these cool books, some textbooks, whatever. Well, I'm here to say that though some of these books are very educational, they are not the books that I would consider the gateway drug for new and beginner permaculturists or sustainable gardeners. Uh, I'll give you some background on the books that I chose. So while I was attending college in between 2018 and 2022, I was lucky enough to be able to take a 6-credit course where I was that was for permaculture design, and I received a permaculture design certificate from my state agency or organization, funded by a public state school. So this isn't some kind of sketchy thing. My university actually promoted it. Besides that, the books I'm going to mention are actually were promoted and required text for said class. The class changed my life. It was one of the best classes I've ever taken, especially in a college setting. It was fun. It opened my eyes to the potential of how humans could live in today, despite all the regulations and I don't want to say red tape, but just paperwork that kind of hinders a natural way of life in the modern world, especially around cities. The phrase "a gateway drug" is not really mine. It is my instructor's. She claims that she had a friend who gave her these books who also described it as a gateway drug. And after reading said books for the class, I agree. I believe there's so much information in these books that it is almost a crime to not recommend these books to anyone who is curious or remotely interested in getting into gardening, as there's so much helpful information that can really improve your skill as a gardener drastically. And those books are Permaculture Design by Aranya, a step-by-step guide, as well as one of my favorites, Gaia's Garden by Toby Hemenway. This is my favorite book by far. You can get both of these on Amazon. These books are worth it in my opinion, and you should definitely pick them up either used or on Amazon brand new or at your public library. Personally, I recommend buying them yourself and having a copy because these are great references that you will definitely go back to, especially if you're young like me. If you also are just starting, you definitely should have them because you will probably want to make changes, as you will probably make mistakes in your design process. So the first book I would like to cover is the Permaculture Design book. This book, in my opinion, is the more boring out of the two, but it is probably more important than the Gaia's Garden. I say this because design is pretty much your foundation. If you look at it from the perspective of a house or a building, this is your concrete. This is everything holding it up. You need a strong foundation before you can build up on it because, as we all know, if you kind of just start doing stuff and you don't really know where it's going, it has a higher probability of failing, and all that time and energy you put into something is going to go down the drain potentially. So you can avoid that by taking the time, reading this, comprehending it, and drawing out your plan or base map. I can't stress this enough because I've made so many mistakes that would have been avoidable had I had this resource in my own garden. And I've only been gardening for, I want to say, between 3 to 5 years. I can't really remember. because I've been going to school. I was going to school and coming back and forth to a place where I had the ability to garden. But even in a small community plot, I believe that these resources are they're invaluable. They allow you to kind of think about how plants interact with each other and how you can maximize the yield in a given area. So within the Aranya book, I'll just kind of put it in the middle so you guys can see it. It's kind of broken up into, I want to say, 3 parts. Yep, it's broken up into 3 parts, like a lot of books. In part 1, they're talking about the preconceptions and which include observation skills, which is really just patterns, and the introduction to the idea of systems within a garden in design. And then it also talks about effective designs and identifying roles of things in your system and flowcharts, as well as structure. In part 2, the design process is really all that's talked about in here. It's things like land surveying, base map creation, recording site information, and measurements, just general measurements of how far things are in spacing, which are crucial if you're really kind of trying to get nitpicky. There is some room for a little bit of leeway, but you definitely want to put the work in at the beginning, like I said. Within part 2, they also talk about things such as SMART goals, which is an acronym. I can't really tell you that. I can't remember that full acronym, but it's for clients, which is really, could be you, could be friends, could be family, could be people that are paying you to do this potentially. I know some people are able to do that. It also includes an analysis of the land, placement of plants and buildings, design proposals, implementation, maintenance and evaluation. You're presenting it to a client. In part 3, they're kind of going beyond the land-based designs. There's also reflection and resources and references, as well as some reading where they list some books. The author lists some books that they felt either helps or just good general books. Some of the books I have on the floor are actually recommendations. I believe it is these Edible Forest Gardens, 1 and 2, which kind of talk about a forest, perennial food forest design, which is not applicable to everyone if you're depending on what you're trying to do. But for me, I wanted to learn about it because they claimed, a lot of people I talked to claim these 2 books are the intermediate version of the books I'm talking about today. So it kind of just expands and is more kind of scientific and knowledge dense. This is a great tool to gain general to intermediate knowledge on the design process. It also stresses the importance of planning and the amount of time you allocate to planning your garden or homestead or whatever. It is so important because without a proper foundation, you are really wasting time and money and effort, because you want everything to run smooth long term. And in 10 years, 5 years, if you plant a tree that's a tiny little stick and you planted them 3 feet from each other and they're all big oak trees, they're all kind of, half your trees are going to die or they're going to grow unhealthy, and you're just going to lose so much, and you're going to be regretting the decisions you made 5-10 years ago when you're losing yield, when you're losing time. Some people don't have, if you're already in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you might not have that time. So just really consider that. I'll give you an idea of what they're talking about in regards to base maps. It's on page 140. I had to do this for this course. The one part of the course was us designing a sustainable little mini home and property, and we needed to pass that within a certain criteria in order to get our certificate. So here's some examples. It can be as simple as some graph paper and some colored pencils. It's a little intricate, but I really recommend this book as a beginner. It's not, like I said, it's not the most interesting book, but it's so crucial that you understand it and really listen to what it has to say. How I use Aranya's book is in my garden is my backyard is actually built on a slope, which is makes sense because we have a basement. So you don't want water pooling up on top. You don't want water pooling above your basement because that will just leak into your home and cause flooding issues or water damage. So I had to understand how the water was moving across the contour of the back of my backyard. So what I learned is on really heavy rains, it floods underneath these mulberry trees that we have around my compost, which isn't ideal, but I make do. So what I did to prevent that is I kind of built my garden beds in a way that it slows down as much water that's running down the slope. So everything kind of gets absorbed the best that it can. So there's no waste and just slows that water down from running down that side. And I have noticed that we don't get as much water pooling at the bottom anymore since I've done that and use the lasagna method if you're familiar with that. I'll do another video about that as soon as I touch up my garden beds this fall before I put them to rest. I also learned a lot about microclimates and understanding how different areas are impacted by sun, wind, and just heat altogether based on how close they are to the house, how much direct sun they're getting, where the wind's blowing at them in the winter versus in the summer, how the sun's moving, how daylight, shade, all that. Another one, like I mentioned, is shade. I've had areas that get great sunlight in early spring, it's full sun, and then by early to midsummer, it's partial sun, just because of how much shade that canopy trees are putting just from their leaves and foliage. So I can't emphasize really considering that because I kind of stunted my potato harvest this year and my corn harvest because I didn't account for how much shade was being put out. So just some food for thought and things that I kind of learned after reading this book. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about Gaia's Garden, as I mentioned earlier, by Toby Hemenway. I describe this book as a general guide to sustainable or perennial permaculture gardening. It has various accounts and stories of some of his friends, it seems like, and how permaculture has benefited their property or backyard garden. And it also kind of really emphasizes working with nature. A lot of gardening books are kind of just, I call run-of-the-mill general conventional gardening books, especially old school books. They kind of promote herbicides, pesticides, not necessarily organic ways or natural ways to cure your issues that you're having in your garden. I always promote that. I don't want to be eating Roundup. I don't want to be eating any type of raid or pesticide on my stuff because that's poison. I don't want to poison myself. This book also shows what you can do with permaculture. It's very motivating in that way for me because, if you ever get kind of burnt out or you just you feel like you can't think of anything, I'll go back to this book and say, how did someone else do it? What information can I have? Especially in regards to kind of planting design and structure and ideas that are based out of more, I think, non-Western agricultural methods. So this book is also broken up into 3 different parts. I'll also put this back down. Part 1 is describing the garden as an ecosystem, which for many that might seem kind of redundant, but a lot of people aren't scientists, a lot of people aren't ecologists, a lot of people took maybe one biology class in high school or college, and I think it's really important to reiterate these ideas that, you know, your garden's living. It's not some dead thing that you just kind of put plants in, water, and then it goes away. You know, it's the idea that there's all these different organisms and plant organisms and things happening that are changing the energy dynamic in your garden, which then gives you food. All these organisms play a role, and you're part of that ecosystem too. Part two is the parts and systems of the ecological garden. I added the parts and systems, but it's just kind of, to me, reiterates the changing, all the little pieces that go into your garden. It talks about reviving soil, and I believe he gives a few accounts of that, and catching rainwater, which, if you can in your state, I really recommend it. I'd love to, but I'm really hesitant about catching rainwater with the shingles we have on. I don't really understand the toxicity and all that. I know you can't drink it if you have, I would say, oil or petroleum-based shingles or asphalt shingles. So I don't really want to put that on my garden because I know plants will uptake that and I'll eat it. So I'm kind of hesitant. It also talks about bringing in diversity and having versatile plants that work for many different things, not just one. So I'm not just growing sweet corn just for the corn cobs and then I'm throwing everything else out. Or I'm not just growing all these other plants just for me. Everything's got to have multiple purposes that goes back into the system, not just for the sole idea of I'm going to eat this and then I'm throwing everything else in the dumpster or in the trash. No, there's reasoning behind that. A lot of that can be used, or it should be able to come back next year and it should do multiple things if it can. In part three, they're talking about is assembling and putting together and designing the ecological garden. So it's kind of is an overview of this book. So just kind of a little brief summary. It talks about map design, plant references, introduction to guilds, which are the interplanting of various types of plants based on how they interact with and how they grow. So a basic idea would be like, grow a big hardwood tree. So like, let's say an oak tree. And then underneath that, you can put a small sub-canopy tree, such as like a fruit tree, a semi-dwarf, whatever. And in our case, let's say a pawpaw tree. Below that pawpaw tree, you could put a vining plant that climbs up the pawpaw tree, such as grapes. And then along the base of that, you could put comfrey or any other kind of foliage plant that kind of shades the roots and mulches the bottom. So that's an idea of a guild. You could even plant garlic around the edges of that, and you promote all this diversity. You could put flowers, medicinal herbs, teas, stuff for tea. The list goes on. That's what I love about permaculture. And a lot of those plants are perennial, so they come back time and time again. And you can split them, and you don't have to go buy seeds or seedlings or anything. You can just slowly add to your collection. So beyond that, it also talks about urban planting and an introduction to food forest. Overall, Gaia's Garden shows the possibilities and introduces cool ideas in regards to space, efficiency issues, and planting styles. It improves your self-reliance and maximizes yields for less money, which is great, especially in our modern economy and how everything's playing out right now. If you can save a few dollars here and there and put it towards, your family or some food, I greatly recommend that. So this book really had a great impact on me. I really love the colors and the amount of information in here. It kind of is a little bit dense and textbooky if you're not a scientist or nerd like I am. It has a lot of great information. It talks about things that attract birds, so much things. What you can do with chickens, rabbits, if you want to raise livestock in your backyard. It's just so inspirational for me. It's really creative. It shows so many unique ways that you can grow food besides linear rows, like a Mandela garden or a I believe it's keyhole garden, which is the idea is rounded area, or rounded garden plots have more surface area that you can actually use rather than linear strips. So that's cool. If you do end up picking this book, just understand that, like I said, it's dense. It's a great reference to have long term, and please do take notes, as I regret not taking notes, as I was just trying to read this with the class and I missed a lot of information that I just like, oh, I'll remember that. No, I didn't. Anything that strikes you as interesting or something you didn't know, I suggest you write it down in a little notepad or something, because you'll forget about it and you'll want to incorporate it into your garden possibly, and you'll forget and have to go dig through it again. So I really recommend just doing that for yourself. How these books go together is the permaculture design is more about like I said, more focused on design and organization, which is huge, as I can't emphasize enough. It's so important, because without this, you can't have this. Okay? Without this, you can't have this. The second, Gaia's Garden, talks about more ecology and applied knowledge, which is what I call field notes or field work. It's just applied ideas and concepts of ecology, and just years of gardening experience and talking with other gardeners in various climates, and just kind of figuring out what works, as well as seeing what many indigenous and other third world countries do that aren't in linear ag fields like we have here in North America and the United States. Design is crucial and emphasized in both books, but each has its own strengths and niches where it really focuses. If you're coming in brand new to the hobby or lifestyle of gardening, I will always recommend these books to you. I will always recommend these books to avid conventional gardeners or farmers, as I wish to really increase their perspective and possibly help the earth in regards to sustainability. Because I have a great-grandfather who was a custom cutter for wheat out here in the Midwest, and he lived through the Dust Bowl, and he saw all that, and that was from wheat farmers. That was from improper tilling and harvesting methods. So I really think for long-term food security here in the United States and globally, we really need to change stuff up, even if it means everyone kind of having their own little piece of pie, or a piece of the pie in their backyard or home, because I think we can grow so much of our food, and it's a shame that we don't. The potential for creativity in your life and in your food and garden is so huge, and I think a lot of people really need that outlet, especially in a day where everything's kind of already cookie cutter and made easy for you. It's convenient. This is a great outlet for people who want to have a project and just build onto it and just make it great, even though they feel like they don't have anything else. I can't emphasize these books enough. If you're questioning it and you just don't really know where to start in the term of gardening or in the world of gardening, pick up these books. You will not be disappointed. I will say I definitely look at Gaia's Garden more, but that could be because the pictures and just the overall pleasant images and just colors. It's more exciting. But when I end up buying land in the future, I will definitely pull this out, and I'll definitely have a few months of design before I even touch anything, and I'll really do the footwork and the measurements and all that. So thank you for watching. I'm really thankful for my new subscribers, and let me know if you have any recommendations of things you'd like me to talk about. I will talk about some of these edible forest garden books in the future. I have more videos on their way. So yeah, thank you for watching. Thank you for the new subscribers and all the likes and comments and kind things. I really hope to teach someone something, and maybe I can actually motivate someone to try something new and gain some new perspective.